Wyoming Territory, 1875. The frontier stretched like an untamed beast across the land, swallowing men whole and spitting out only the strongest. Quinn Calloway knew this truth better than most. At 25, his eyes carried the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much frontier justice and not enough mercy. The harsh Wyoming winters had taught him that survival meant keeping to yourself, that attachment was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. The West takes more than it gives, Quinn's father had told him before a band of raiders took the old man's life. Quinn had been 14 then, forced to grow up quick and mean. Now, 11 years later, he worked cattle for the Circle Diamond Ranch, moving with the rhythm of the seasons across the high plains. He believed, with the certainty that comes from repeated loss, that love was just another snare waiting to trap the unwary. His false belief wasn't something he'd ever spoken aloud, but it lived in the careful distance he kept from others, in the polite refusals when the daughters of nearby homesteaders offered to pack him special lunches or mend his shirts. The spring cattle drive had finished early, and Quinn found himself with 2 weeks' leave before the summer work began in earnest. Most cowboys headed straight for the nearest town, eager to spend their pay on whiskey and women, but Quinn preferred the quiet solitude of the ranch's northern line cabin. It sat on the edge of Blackfoot territory, a place most men avoided. Quinn liked it that way. "You riding out to that death trap again?" Thomas, the trail boss, asked when Quinn saddled his roan gelding. "Cabin needs tending," Quinn answered, tying his bedroll behind the saddle. "There's a dance in Sweetwater Saturday next. Whole town's turning out." Quinn shook his head. "I will pass on that." Thomas spat tobacco juice into the dust. "One day, Calloway, you will figure out there is more to life than empty cabins and lonesome trails." Quinn offered no response as he swung into the saddle. He had everything he needed, his horse, his rifle, and no one to answer to. That was freedom, that was safety. Everything else was just distraction. The 2-day ride to the line cabin took him through rolling hills that had just begun to green with spring grass. When the small log structure came into view, Quinn felt the familiar loosening in his chest that came with true solitude. The cabin had one room, a stone fireplace, and a view of the mountains that made a man feel small in all the right ways. He was 3 days into his stay, returning from checking the fence line to the west when he first saw the smoke. It rose in a thin gray column against the blue sky, maybe 5 miles north of his position. That was odd. The Blackfoot rarely came this far south anymore, and no white settlers had pushed this deep into the territory. Quinn hesitated. The smart move would be to ignore it. Whatever trouble was brewing out there wasn't his concern. But curiosity, a dangerous trait on the frontier, got the better of him. He turned his horse toward the smoke. It was late afternoon when he came upon the burned-out remains of a small wagon. The attack had happened recently, the wood still smoldered in places. Quinn dismounted, rifle ready, and circled the wreckage. 2 bodies lay face down near what remained of the wagon bed, a man and woman from the look of their clothing. Arrows protruded from both. Quinn knelt beside them, studying the fletching, not Blackfoot. These were crow arrows, which made even less sense. The crow usually kept to their reservation these days. A sound, so faint he nearly missed it, made Quinn spin around, rifle raised. He scanned the surrounding brush but saw nothing. Then he heard it again, a muffled whimper coming from beneath the overturned wagon. Approaching cautiously, Quinn peered under the charred wood. 2 wide blue eyes stared back at him from a dirt-streaked face. A young woman lay curled beneath the shelter of the wagon bed, one arm clearly broken, her dress torn and bloodied. "I am not going to hurt you," Quinn said, setting his rifle aside to show his peaceful intentions. "Were you traveling with these folks?" The woman nodded, tears cutting clean trails through the soot on her cheeks. "My aunt and uncle," she whispered. "We were headed to Oregon." Her voice broke. "Are they?" Quinn nodded grimly. "I am sorry. Can you move? We need to get you somewhere safe before whoever did this decides to come back." Her face tightened with pain as she tried to shift. "My arm, and I think my ankle too." Quinn made a quick decision. "I have a cabin about 5 miles south. I can take you there, tend to your injuries." Fear flashed across her face. "How do I know you are not worse than what I am running from?" "A fair question in these parts. You do not. But your options are limited, miss." She studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "I am Faith Forrester," she said, her voice steadier than he would have expected given the circumstances. "I would appreciate that help, Mr. Calloway." "Quinn Calloway," he reached under the wagon. "This will hurt." Her scream when he pulled her out sent birds flying from nearby trees. Quinn worked quickly, setting her against a boulder while he gathered what supplies he could salvage from the wagon. The raiders had taken most everything of value, but he found a small trunk that had been partially protected by the wagon's collapse. Faith confirmed it contained her belongings. Getting her onto his horse proved challenging. Her right arm hung at an unnatural angle and she couldn't put weight on her left ankle. Eventually, Quinn lifted her into the saddle, then mounted behind her, keeping her steady against his chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her body trembling with shock and pain. Quinn said nothing, focusing instead on guiding his horse across the uneven terrain. The woman in his arms couldn't have been more than 19 or 20, with long blonde hair that had partially escaped from its pins. Despite the dirt and blood, there was no denying she was beautiful, the kind of beauty that caused problems Quinn preferred to avoid. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun hung low in the western sky. Faith had fallen into a fitful doze against his chest, her breathing shallow. Quinn's shirt was damp where her tears had soaked through. He carried her inside and laid her on his narrow cot. In the better light, he could see the extent of her injuries. Besides the broken arm and sprained ankle, she had cuts and bruises across her exposed skin and a nasty gash along her hairline that had crusted with dried blood. "Miss Forrester," he said softly, "Faith, I need to tend to these wounds." Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain. "My arm hurts something terrible." "I need to set it. It will hurt worse before it feels better." She bit her lower lip, then nodded. "Do what you must." Quinn had set broken bones before. It came with the territory when you worked cattle, but never on a woman. He worked as gently as possible, cleaning her wounds first, then splinting her arm using wood slats from a broken crate. Her ankle he wrapped tightly with strips torn from a spare shirt. Through it all, she remained conscious, tears streaming silently down her face. "You have grit, Miss Forrester," he said when he'd finished. "Most men would have passed out from that pain." The ghost of a smile crossed her pale lips. "My father always said I was too stubborn for my own good." Quinn nodded. "Rest now, I will make something to eat." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Quinn tended Faith's injuries, prepared simple meals, and kept watch for any sign of the raiders returning. Faith slept fitfully, often waking with a start, her eyes wide with terror until she remembered where she was. "You should take the cot," she insisted on the third night. "I can manage on the floor." Quinn shook his head. "A gentleman does not let a lady sleep on the floor." "I doubt many gentlemen find themselves in situations like this," she replied with unexpected humor. Quinn found himself smiling despite his reservations. True enough. On the fourth night, Quinn woke to the sound of quiet weeping. He sat up from his bedroll on the floor to find Faith staring out the cabin's single window, the moonlight illuminating the tears on her face. "Miss Forrester." She startled slightly. "I apologize, I did not mean to wake you." Quinn moved to sit on the edge of the cot. "Are you in pain? I have a little whiskey that might help." She shook her head. "It is not that, I cannot stop seeing them, my aunt and uncle, the arrows." Her voice broke. Without thinking, Quinn reached out and took her uninjured hand. "I know something about that kind of loss. The pictures in your mind will fade with time." "Will they?" She looked up at him, her blue eyes luminous in the darkness. "Sometimes I think the West takes everything good and leaves only ghosts." The echo of his own thoughts startled him. "It can seem that way. Yet you stay." Quinn considered this. "It is what I know." "Is that enough?" There was genuine curiosity in her voice, not judgment. "It has been until now." The honesty of his answer surprised them both. Faith squeezed his hand lightly. "Thank you for saving me, for being kind." Quinn found himself unable to meet her gaze. Try to sleep. Things often look different in the morning light. But sleep continued to elude Faith. Each night, Quinn would wake to find her sitting up, staring out the window or into the dying embers of the fire. Once, he found her standing outside the cabin in her nightdress despite the chill, her face turned toward the stars. "You need rest to heal," he told her as he guided her back inside. "I cannot sleep," she confessed. "Not until morning comes. I keep thinking I hear them, the raiders coming back." Quinn understood then. Fear is natural after what you have been through. "It is not just that," Faith said, settling back onto the cot. "I have never been able to sleep easily at night. Even as a child, I would lie awake, imagining every creak was something dreadful." "And yet you came west." A wry smile crossed her face. "I told you." Stubborn. Quinn found himself smiling back, stubborn indeed. As days turned into a week, Quinn became increasingly aware of Faith's presence in ways that unsettled him. The small cabin, once his refuge, now felt charged with an unfamiliar energy. He noticed things he would normally overlook, the graceful line of her neck when she bent to read one of the few books he kept, the way sunlight caught in her golden hair, how her face had begun to fill out as proper food restored her strength. He tried to maintain his distance, to remember why he preferred solitude, but Faith made it difficult. Despite her trauma, or perhaps because of it, she seemed determined to engage with life. She insisted on helping with chores as her mobility improved, asked questions about the ranch, about his past, about the land around them. "You can know this country your whole life and still not understand it," he told her one evening as they watched the sunset paint the distant mountains. "Perhaps that is why I love it," Faith replied. "It feels honest in its wildness." Quinn looked at her surprised. "Most women I have met cannot wait to tame it or leave it." Faith shook her head, blonde hair catching the dying light. "Those mountains do not care if I approve of them. The rivers will flow whether I find them convenient or not. There is freedom in that kind of indifference." It was not a perspective Quinn had considered before. "You are an unusual woman, Miss Forrester." "Faith," she corrected. "After all this, I think we can dispense with formalities, Quinn." His name on her lips sent an unexpected warmth through him. Faith, then. 10 days after bringing her to the cabin, Quinn knew he needed to make decisions. His leave was nearly over and he would be expected back at the ranch. Faith's arm was healing well, but she remained unable to travel long distances. "There is a settlement about 20 miles south," he told her over breakfast. "The widow Holcomb takes in boarders. She could use the company, and you would be safe there until you decide what you want to do." Faith set down her coffee cup. "You are leaving." "I have obligations at the ranch." "Of course," her expression shuddered. "You have already done far more than could be expected." Quinn felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. "I would not leave you alone if there were another option." "There is always another option," Faith said quietly, "but I understand. The world does not stop because one person's life has been upended." That night Quinn woke to an unfamiliar sound. Faith was not in her usual spot by the window or near the fire. Instead, she stood rigid by the door, her splinted arm held protectively against her chest, her other hand gripping the small knife Quinn used for cooking. "Faith." "Listen," she whispered. Quinn reached for his rifle and moved to her side. At first he heard nothing beyond the usual night sounds, the wind in the pines, an owl's distant call. Then he caught it, a faint metallic jingle like spurs or bridle bits. "Someone is out there," Faith breathed. Quinn nodded, motioning for her to move away from the door. "Stay back." He eased the door open a crack, peering into the darkness. The moon had set, leaving only starlight to illuminate the clearing around the cabin. For a long moment he saw nothing, then a shadow moved near the edge of the trees, a man on horseback watching the cabin. Quinn eased the door closed, one rider at the tree line. "Raiders," Faith's voice trembled slightly, "cannot tell, could be anyone, prospector, lost traveler." But Quinn knew better than to believe in coincidences out here. "Stay inside, away from the windows." He pulled on his boots and checked his rifle, then reached for his pistol. "What are you going to do?" Faith asked. "Circle around behind him, find out who he is and what he wants." "That is dangerous." Quinn met her gaze, more dangerous to wait until he has friends join him. Fear showed plainly on Faith's face. "Please be careful." Quinn nodded and slipped out the back door of the cabin, keeping low as he moved through the shadows. He circled wide, using the trees for cover as he approached the position where he'd spotted the rider. The man still sat his horse, watching the cabin. Even in the dim light, Quinn could make out details now, the distinctive feather in the rider's hat, the rifle across his lap. Not a Crow warrior as he'd first feared, but definitely someone tracking them. Quinn raised his rifle and stepped into the open. "That is far enough, friend." The man jerked in surprise, his hand moving toward his weapon. "I would not," Quinn warned, "state your business." "Looking for a girl," the man said after a moment. "Blonde, pretty, traveling with an older couple." Cold anger settled in Quinn's guts. "Why?" "That is my concern." "Not anymore," Quinn said. "Those people you are asking about were killed by Crow raiders 10 days back." The man shifted in his saddle, "All of them?" "Far as I know." A long silence followed. Mind if I take a look in that cabin? I do mind. There is nothing for you here. The standoff stretched between them, tense and dangerous. Finally the man shrugged. No offense meant, just following orders. Whose orders? But the rider was already turning his horse. If you see a blonde girl answering that description, there is reward money waiting in Cheyenne. Man named Hargrove at the silver dollar. Quinn kept his rifle trained on the man until he disappeared into the darkness. Only then did he return to the cabin, where Faith waited, white-faced and trembling. Who was it? She asked as soon as he entered. Someone looking for you, Quinn said, setting his rifle aside. Want to tell me why? Faith sank onto the edge of the cot. I was afraid this would happen. What would happen? She looked up at him, her blue eyes swimming with tears. The man my aunt and uncle were taking me to Oregon to escape. He has sent someone after me. Quinn pulled up the room's only chair and sat facing her. What man? Walter Hargrove, she nearly spat the name. A business associate of my father's. After my parents died last year, he offered for my hand. When I refused, he became insistent, said he had debts owed by my father that only my marriage to him could settle. And was that true? Faith shook her head. My father was meticulous with his accounts, but Hargrove produced papers, loan agreements with my father's signature. They looked genuine enough that the local judge sided with him. So you ran. My aunt and uncle helped me escape. We planned to start fresh in Oregon, where Hargrove's influence could not reach. Her voice broke. Now they are dead because of me. Quinn considered this new information. That rider will report back. Others will come. I know. Faith looked up at him, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. I need to keep moving west. You are in no condition to travel alone. I do not have a choice. Quinn ran a hand through his hair, torn between the safety of distance and the pull he felt toward Faith. You have one more choice. I could take you to the ranch. The owner, Mr. Patterson, is a good man with connections throughout the territory. He could help get word to the proper authorities about this Hargrove's false claims. Hope flickered across Faith's face. Would he do that for a stranger? He would do it as a favor to me. Quinn was surprised by his own certainty. In 10 years working for the Circle Diamond, he had never asked for anything. Why would you do this? Faith asked softly. You do not know me. The question cut to the heart of the change Quinn had been fighting since finding her. Maybe I am tired of the West taking everything good. They left at dawn, Faith riding Quinn's gelding while he walked alongside, leading the horse over the rough terrain. Progress was slow, her injuries still pained her, and Quinn refused to push the pace and risk further harm. Tell me about the ranch, Faith said as they picked their way through a narrow pass. Quinn described the Circle Diamond, the sprawling main house, the bunkhouses where the cowboys slept, the vast grasslands that supported the ranch's 2,000 head of cattle. And the people, Faith pressed, what are they like? Mr. Patterson is fair but demanding. His wife died years back, but his daughter helps run things. The cowboys are a rough bunch but good men mostly. And where do you fit in all this? Quinn considered this. I keep to myself, do my job. The others respect that. Sounds lonely. It is what I know, he repeated his earlier words, but they rang hollow even to his own ears. Is it what you want? Faith asked, echoing her previous question. This time, Quinn had no ready answer. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow beside a small creek. After settling Faith with her back against a fallen log, Quinn built a fire and prepared a simple meal from their provisions. I have never camped under the stars before, Faith admitted, looking up at the vast night sky. It is beautiful. Quinn followed her gaze. Yes, it is. You can see why the Indians believe the stars are the campfires of their ancestors, she mused. It makes death seem less final somehow. Is that what you believe? Faith considered this. I believe there must be more than just this life, with all its cruelty and loss, something that makes sense of it all in the end. Quinn found himself envying her faith, both figuratively and literally. My father believed only in what a man could see and touch, said everything else was just stories people tell to make the darkness less frightening. And you? I have not decided. Faith smiled gently. That seems fair. They fell into a comfortable silence as the fire crackled between them. When Quinn looked over a while later, he found Faith had fallen asleep, her head tilted against the log, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd met her. "Well, look at that," he murmured, surprised. It struck him then, the significance of what he was seeing. In all their days at the cabin, Faith had never slept before dawn, too haunted by fears and memories. Yet here, exposed to the elements with danger potentially lurking in every shadow, she had found enough peace to surrender to sleep. Something shifted in Quinn's chest, a loosening of a knot he hadn't realized was there. He moved quietly to drape his coat over Faith's sleeping form, then settled himself nearby, rifle across his lap. He would keep watch tonight. Morning brought clear skies and the promise of good traveling weather. Quinn woke Faith gently, offering her coffee and the last of their biscuits. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, noticing the shadows beneath his eyes. "Enough," he lied. Faith studied him with a knowing look. "You kept watch all night. It seemed prudent." "Thank you," she touched his arm lightly. "Not just for the watch, but I have not slept like that in longer than I can remember." Quinn nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "We should get moving, still a day's journey to the ranch." They made better time than expected, arriving at the Circle Diamond as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The ranch spread before them, a collection of sturdy log buildings surrounding a central courtyard, with corrals and barns extending outward. Several cowboys looked up from their work as Quinn and Faith approached, surprise evident on their faces. Quinn was not a man who brought visitors, especially not female ones. Thomas, the trail boss, stepped forward. "Calloway, we were beginning to wonder if the mountains had swallowed you whole." "Nearly," Quinn replied, helping Faith down from the horse. "Is Mr. Patterson around? We need to speak with him." Thomas's eyes widened slightly at the "we," but he nodded toward the main house. "In his office last I saw. Who's your friend?" "Miss Faith Forrester," Quinn said. "She needs our help." Word spread quickly. By the time Quinn and Faith reached the main house, several curious onlookers had gathered to watch their progress. Quinn felt Faith stiffen beside him. "Do not worry," he murmured. "They are just not used to seeing me with company." Samuel Patterson proved to be exactly as Quinn had described, fair-minded, direct, and possessed of a natural authority that commanded respect without demanding it. He listened without interruption as Faith explained her situation, from her parents' deaths to Hargrove's false claims to the attack that had killed her aunt and uncle. "And you believe this Hargrove sent men after you?" Patterson asked when she had finished. "I am certain of it," Faith replied. "The timing of the attack, the rider Quinn encountered, it cannot be coincidence." Patterson turned to Quinn. "You vouching for Miss Forrester's story, Calloway?" Quinn nodded. "Yes, sir. I am." The older man studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That is good enough for me. Miss Forrester, you are welcome to stay at the Circle Diamond while we sort this matter out. My daughter Eliza will see you settled in the guest room." "Thank you, Mr. Patterson," Faith said, tears of relief in her eyes. "I cannot express my gratitude adequately." "No need for that," Patterson replied kindly. "Out here, we look after our own, and any friend of Quinn's is someone worth helping." After Faith had been escorted upstairs by Patterson's daughter, the rancher turned to Quinn. "In 10 years, you have never asked for a single favor. Now you bring a young woman to my doorstep and stake your reputation on her word." Quinn met his employer's gaze steadily. "Yes, sir. She must be special. She has been through a terrible ordeal." Patterson's eyes twinkled knowingly. "That is not what I asked, son." Quinn felt heat rise in his face. "I just want to help her find justice." "Of course," Patterson said, his tone making it clear he suspected there was more to it than that. "Well, I will send a telegram to the marshal in Cheyenne tomorrow. If this Hargrove is falsifying documents and sending men to abduct young women, the law will want to hear about it." "Thank you, sir." Patterson clapped him on the shoulder. "Get some rest, Calloway. You look like you have not slept in days." Quinn had intended to return to the bunkhouse, to slip back into the familiar routine of ranch life, but he found himself reluctant to leave the main house while Faith remained there. Instead, he settled on the front porch, ostensibly to clean his rifle but really to keep watch. As twilight deepened into night, Eliza Patterson joined him on the porch. "She is resting comfortably," she said without preamble. "Dr. Reynolds was here checking cattle anyway, so father had him look at her arm. Says it is healing nicely." "That is good news," Quinn replied, relief evident in his voice. Eliza studied him with interest. She told me how you found her, how you took care of her all those days. It was a brave thing you did." Quinn shrugged uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Eliza said firmly, "they would not have. Most men would have buried the dead and ridden on, not burdened themselves with an injured woman in hostile territory." When Quinn did not respond, Eliza continued more gently. "Faith seems like a remarkable young woman." "She is," Quinn agreed before he could stop himself. A knowing smile crossed Eliza's face. "Well, good night, Quinn. Try to get some sleep yourself." But sleep eluded him that night, his thoughts too full of concerns about Hargrove's men finding the ranch, about Faith's safety, about the unfamiliar feelings stirring within him. He dozed fitfully on the porch swing, waking at every sound. Around midnight, the front door opened quietly and Faith stepped out, wrapped in a borrowed shawl. She didn't seem surprised to find Quinn there. "I thought you might be," she said softly, keeping watch again. "Force of habit," he replied, moving to make room for her on the swing. Faith sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her through the night chill. "I could not sleep." "Unfamiliar surroundings," Quinn suggested. She shook her head. "No, not that. I just kept thinking about everything, about my aunt and uncle, about what happens next, about—" She hesitated. "About what?" "About you," Faith admitted. "About how different my life would be right now if you had not decided to investigate that smoke." Quinn tried to dismiss her words. Anyone would have. "No," she interrupted firmly. "Eliza told me how you are, Quinn Calloway, how you keep to yourself, how you never ask for help or offer it beyond what duty requires. So do not tell me anyone would have done what you did." He could not deny the truth of her words. "Why did you help me?" Faith asked, her blue eyes searching his face in the moonlight. The truth this time. Quinn looked away, struggling to articulate feelings he scarcely understood himself. "When I found you under that wagon, something changed. I cannot explain it better than that. It was like seeing a light in darkness I had not realized was so complete." Faith's hand found his, her fingers cool against his calloused palm. "I understand that feeling." They sat in silence for a long moment, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing heartbeat. "What will you do?" Quinn finally asked, "after all this is resolved?" Faith considered this. "I had planned to continue to Oregon, start fresh, but now—" She left the thought unfinished. "Now," Quinn prompted, his heart beating faster. "Now I am not so certain that running forward is the answer," she said softly. "Perhaps what I have been searching for was here all along." The hope her words kindled in Quinn's chest was so unfamiliar it almost hurt. Before he could respond, however, the sound of approaching horses broke the stillness of the night. Quinn was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. "Get inside," he told Faith. "Wake Mr. Patterson." Faith hesitated only briefly before hurrying into the house. Quinn moved to the edge of the porch, watching as 3 riders approached the main gate of the ranch. Even in the darkness, he could make out the familiar silhouette of the man who had been watching the cabin 2 nights before. By the time the riders reached the front of the house, lights were appearing in windows throughout the ranch. Patterson emerged from the house, shotgun in hand, with Faith and Eliza behind him. "That is far enough," Patterson called to the riders. "State your business." The lead rider, the same man Quinn had confronted, pulled his horse to a stop. "Evening, folks. Sorry for the late arrival. I am looking for a young lady, blonde, pretty, traveling with an older couple who met with misfortune." "And who might you be?" Patterson asked. "Name is Dawes. I work for Mr. Walter Hargrove of Cheyenne. The young lady is his fiancée, run off before the wedding. Mr. Hargrove is mighty concerned for her safety." "That is a lie," Faith said, stepping forward despite Quinn's warning glance. "I am Faith Forrester, and I was never engaged to Walter Hargrove. He is trying to force me into marriage to cover up his theft from my father's estate." Dawes' expression hardened. "Miss Forrester, you are obviously confused after your ordeal. Mr. Hargrove sent us to escort you safely back to Cheyenne." "The lady is not going anywhere," Quinn said, stepping in front of Faith. "This is not your concern, Cowboy," Dawes replied, his hand drifting toward his holster. Patterson raised his shotgun slightly. "I would reconsider that move, Mr. Dawes. Miss Forrester is under the protection of the Circle Diamond now. If Mr. Hargrove has legitimate concerns, he can take them up with the territorial marshal." By now, several ranch hands had emerged from the bunkhouse, rifles in hand. The odds had shifted dramatically against Dawes and his men. "Now," Patterson continued, I suggest you gentlemen turn around and head back to Cheyenne. Tell Mr. Hargrove that if he wants to discuss Miss Forrester's situation, he can come himself, unarmed and in daylight." For a tense moment, it seemed Dawes might challenge the directive. Then with obvious reluctance he nodded. "This is not over," he said, his eyes fixed on Faith. "Mr. Hargrove is not a man who gives up easily." "Neither are we," Quinn replied steadily. As the riders departed, Faith's hand found Quinn's, squeezing tight. "They will be back," she whispered. "Yes," Quinn agreed, "but next time we will be ready." The next week passed in a strange state of suspense. True to his word, Patterson sent telegrams to the marshal in Cheyenne and to contacts in Faith's hometown, seeking confirmation of her story and evidence against Hargrove. Faith remained at the ranch, her presence transforming the atmosphere in subtle ways. The cowboys cleaned up their language, Eliza found a companion close to her own age, and even Patterson seemed to enjoy having a fresh face at the dinner table. For Quinn, the change was more profound. He found himself seeking out Faith's company at every opportunity, volunteering for tasks that kept him near the main house rather than out on the range. They spent evenings on the porch swing, talking until the stars filled the sky, sharing stories of their pasts and tentative dreams for the future. "I never thought I would find this," Faith admitted one evening as they watched the sunset. "After my parents died, I believed that part of my life, the part where I belonged somewhere, was over forever." Quinn understood exactly what she meant. "I have been alone so long I forgot what it felt like not to be." Faith turned to him, her expression serious. "You do not have to be alone anymore, Quinn." The warmth of her words wrapped around his heart, melting the ice that had accumulated over years of solitude. Before he could respond, however, a rider appeared on the road leading to the ranch, a single figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. Quinn tensed, reaching instinctively for the pistol he now wore constantly. "Stay here," he told Faith, moving to the edge of the porch. But as the rider drew nearer, Quinn recognized the distinctive blue uniform of the territorial marshal's office. Faith joined him, her hand finding his as they watched the lawman approach. Marshal James Thornton was a formidable presence, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that had seen its share of frontier justice. He accepted Patterson's offer of coffee and a meal before getting down to business. "I received your telegram," Thornton said, addressing Patterson but glancing toward Faith. "Made some inquiries about Walter Hargrove." "And?" Faith asked, unable to contain her anxiety. "It seems, Miss Forrester, that your suspicions were well-founded. Hargrove has been using falsified loan documents to pressure several families in similar situations. 2 other young women have come forward since I started asking questions." Relief washed over Faith's face. "Then you believe me?" "I do," Thornton confirmed. "Furthermore, I have issued a warrant for Hargrove's arrest. His accounts have been frozen pending investigation." "What about the men he sent after Faith?" Quinn asked. Thornton's expression darkened. "That is where things get complicated. Hargrove denies sending anyone to find Miss Forrester, claims he has been in Cheyenne the whole time handling business matters." "He is lying," Faith insisted. "The man Dawes said he worked for Hargrove." "I believe you," Thornton assured her. "But without evidence linking Hargrove directly to either Dawes or the attack on your aunt and uncle, it is his word against yours." Quinn felt Faith's hand tighten around his. "So he could still send men after her?" "He could," Thornton admitted, "but it would be foolish given the investigation already underway. Still, I would advise caution until Hargrove is in custody." That night Faith could not sleep. Quinn found her on the porch well after midnight, wrapped in a blanket against the spring chill. "You should rest," he told her, settling beside her on the swing. "I keep thinking about what the marshal said," Faith replied. "About Hargrove denying everything. What if he escapes justice? What if those men come back?" Quinn took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Whatever happens, you are not alone anymore. I will not let anyone hurt you." Faith looked up at him, her blue eyes luminous in the moonlight. "Why, Quinn Calloway, why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" The question hung between them, demanding an honesty Quinn had never allowed himself before. "Because I love you," he said simply. "I think I have loved you since I found you under that wagon, so determined to survive despite everything." Tears filled Faith's eyes. "I never thought I would hear those words again after my parents died. I had resigned myself to being alone." You are not alone, Quinn promised, not anymore. Their first kiss was gentle, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more profound. When they finally parted, Faith rested her forehead against Quinn's, her breathing unsteady. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have since you sat up night after night, keeping watch while I could not sleep. A sound in the darkness interrupted the moment, the unmistakable jingle of spurs on the gravel path leading to the house. Quinn was on his feet instantly, positioning himself in front of Faith as he drew his pistol. Who is there? He called. Now, came an unfamiliar voice, smooth as silk but cold as winter. Is that any way to greet a man who has traveled all this way? A figure stepped into the moonlight, a well-dressed man of middle years, with a trimmed beard and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. Though Quinn had never seen him before, he knew instantly who it was. Hargrove, he said, his grip tightening on his pistol. Walter Hargrove smiled thinly. At your service. I have come for my fiancée. Faith stood, moving to Quinn's side despite his protective gesture. I am not your fiancé, Walter, I never was. Details, my dear, Hargrove replied with a dismissive wave. The point is, you belong to me. Your father ensured that with his debts. The marshal knows the truth, Faith said, about the falsified documents, about the other families you have swindled. It is over. Something dangerous flashed in Hargrove's eyes. Nothing is over until I say it is. Quinn took a half step forward. You need to leave, now. Hargrove's smile widened. I was hoping you would say something like that. From the shadows around the house, 4 men emerged, Dawes among them, their guns already drawn. You see, Hargrove continued conversationally, I find it best to negotiate from a position of strength, so here is what will happen. Faith will come with me, quietly and without fuss. In return, I will not have my men burn this charming ranch to the ground with everyone inside. That will not happen, Quinn said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. They were outnumbered, outgunned. I was afraid you might say that, Hargrove sighed. Dawes, please demonstrate our seriousness. Before Quinn could react, Dawes fired a shot that splintered the wood of the porch railing inches from where Faith stood. She gasped but did not cry out. The next one will not miss, Hargrove promised. Faith, darling, your decision. Quinn felt Faith's hand on his arm. I cannot let anyone else die because of me, she whispered. No, Quinn protested. We will find another way. There is no other way, Faith replied, her voice trembling but resolute. I cannot bear more blood on my hands. A wise choice, Hargrove said. Come along, my dear. As Faith moved forward, the sound of a shotgun being cocked broke the tense silence. Samuel Patterson stood in the doorway of the house, his weapon leveled at Hargrove's chest. I believe the lady has declined your proposal, Patterson said calmly. Lights began appearing in windows across the ranch as the commotion roused the sleeping household. Within moments, the odds had shifted dramatically as ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse, armed and ready. Hargrove's confident expression faltered. This changes nothing, I will still have what is mine. Faith Forrester does not belong to you or anyone else, Quinn said, stepping forward to stand beside her. And if you ever come near her again, it will be the last mistake you make. For a moment, it seemed Hargrove might order his men to fight anyway. Then with a cold smile he stepped back. This is merely a delay, not a defeat, remember that. Dawes, he called to his men, we are leaving, for now. As Hargrove and his men retreated into the darkness, Quinn pulled Faith into his arms, feeling her trembling against him. It is all right, he murmured into her hair. You are safe. He will come back, Faith whispered. He will never stop. Quinn exchanged a look with Patterson over Faith's head. The older man nodded slightly, a silent communication passing between them. Then we will be waiting, Quinn promised. The confrontation with Hargrove changed everything. Patterson immediately sent riders to alert Marshal Thornton, while the ranch transformed into something resembling a fortress. Cowboys patrolled the perimeter, windows were boarded, and supplies were stockpiled in case of a siege. Through it all, Faith remained remarkably calm, her initial fear hardening into determination. I am tired of running, she told Quinn as they helped prepare the ranch's defenses. Tired of letting fear rule my life. 3 days after Hargrove's visit, Marshal Thornton arrived with a posse of 6 deputies. Hargrove made a mistake showing himself here, Thornton explained. Confirms everything you told us, Miss Forrester. We will find him. He will not go easily, Faith warned. Few men of his type do, Thornton agreed. But justice has a way of catching up even out here. The marshal's prediction proved accurate sooner than anyone expected. The following night, as a spring storm rolled across the prairie, Hargrove made his move. This time, there was no pretense of negotiation, just the crackle of gunfire as his men attacked the ranch from multiple directions. Quinn and Faith had been in the barn when the first shots rang out. "Stay here," Quinn told her, reaching for his rifle. "Keep low." "No," Faith replied, picking up a shotgun Patterson had given her for protection. "I am done hiding." The firefight that followed was brief but intense. Hargrove had recruited more men, a dozen or more, but they faced the combined forces of the ranch hands and Thornton's deputies, all defending prepared positions. Quinn and Faith made their way from the barn to the main house, moving carefully through the darkness. They had almost reached the porch when a figure loomed out of the shadows directly in their path. Walter Hargrove's face was contorted with rage, his carefully cultivated facade of civilization stripped away to reveal the predator beneath. He held a pistol aimed directly at Faith. "If I cannot have you," he snarled, "no one will." Quinn moved instinctively, placing himself between Faith and Hargrove's weapon. "It is over, Hargrove. The marshal is here. Your men are surrendering." "It is not over until I say it is," Hargrove shouted, his finger tightening on the trigger. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Quinn felt the burn as Hargrove's bullet grazed his shoulder, but his attention was fixed on the expression of shock that spread across the other man's face. Hargrove looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his chest, then back up at Faith, who stood with the smoking shotgun still raised. "You," he managed, before crumpling to the ground. Faith lowered the weapon, her face pale but composed. "Yes, me." As quickly as it had begun, the battle ended. With Hargrove fallen and Marshal Thornton's deputies moving systematically through the ranch, the remaining attackers threw down their weapons and surrendered. Dawn broke over a changed landscape. The ranch had suffered some damage, bullet holes in buildings, a section of fence destroyed by fire, but no lives had been lost among the defenders. 4 of Hargrove's men lay dead, including the man himself, with several others wounded and now in custody. Quinn found Faith sitting on the porch steps, watching as the marshal's deputies prepared to transport their prisoners back to Cheyenne. Her shotgun lay beside her unloaded now. "Are you all right?" he asked, settling beside her. Faith considered the question carefully. "I do not know," she admitted. "I never thought I would take a life. But when I saw him aiming at you, something inside me simply acted." Quinn took her hand. "You saved my life." "As you saved mine," she replied softly. "Does that make us even?" Despite everything, Quinn found himself smiling. "I do not think it works that way." Faith leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I do not want to be even. I want to be indebted to you forever and you to me." "Is that strange?" "No," Quinn said, understanding exactly what she meant. "I think that might be what love is." Marshal Thornton approached them, his expression sober but satisfied. "Miss Forrester, I will need a statement from you about what happened here. But I want you to know that from everything we have gathered, you acted in clear self-defense." Faith nodded. "Thank you, Marshal." "What happens now?" Quinn asked. "With Hargrove's claims against Faith's inheritance. Without him to pursue them, and with evidence of fraud already established, I expect the court will restore Miss Forrester's property rights promptly," Thornton replied. "You should be a wealthy woman again soon, Miss Forrester." After the marshal had moved on, Faith turned to Quinn. "Does that change things?" "What do you mean?" "My inheritance," Faith clarified. "Does it matter to you that I might be wealthy?" Quinn considered this. "Only if it matters to you that I am not." Faith's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "The only thing that matters to me is that I love you, Quinn Calloway. Everything else is just details." 1 year later, Faith stood on the porch of a new house built on the eastern edge of the Circle Diamond property. The autumn air carried the scent of pine and the distant smell of wood smoke as the ranch prepared for winter. So much had changed in 12 months. Her inheritance restored, Faith had invested in the Circle Diamond, becoming a junior partner in the operation. Quinn had accepted Patterson's offer to become foreman, a position that came with the opportunity to build their own home on ranch land. Their wedding, 3 months after the night Hargrove died, had been a joyous affair attended by everyone from the ranch and many from the surrounding settlements. Eliza Patterson had stood as Faith's maid of honor, while Thomas had served as Quinn's best man. Now, as the sun set over the mountains, Faith wrapped her shawl tighter against the evening chill. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her smile. Quinn, returning from a day overseeing the final roundup before winter. He dismounted with the easy grace that still made her heart skip, leading his horse to the small corral beside the house before joining her on the porch. "Waiting long?" he asked, pulling her into an embrace. "Not too long," Faith replied, leaning into his warmth. "I like watching the sunset." Quinn pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Any particular reason you are out in the cold instead of by the fire?" Faith's smile widened. "I was thinking about the first night I slept properly after you found me. Remember, under the stars?" "I remember," Quinn said softly. "You surprised me. After all those nights awake at the cabin, suddenly you were sleeping like a baby on open ground." "I realized something that night," Faith said. "It was never the darkness that scared me or the strange sounds. It was being alone with them." Quinn's arms tightened around her. "You are not alone anymore." "No," Faith agreed, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Neither are we." Quinn drew back slightly, his expression questioning. Faith took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Faith." He whispered, hope and wonder mixing in his voice. "Dr. Reynolds confirmed it yesterday," she said. "Next spring there will be 3 of us." The joy that spread across Quinn's face was like nothing Faith had ever seen, pure and unguarded, washing away the last traces of the solitary man she had first met beneath a vast Wyoming sky. That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Quinn's hand rested protectively over the place where their child grew. Faith drifted toward sleep, secure in the knowledge that whatever sounds the night might bring, the wind in the pines, the distant cry of a wolf, the creak of their new home settling, she would face them with Quinn beside her. And for the first time in her life, Faith Calloway slept without fear, knowing that love had finally tamed her restless nights.